At this point, we have created the HTML structure, our outline. We've added content. We have written images to the server, so we have access to our images, and we have placed our first image. We are now ready to begin adding the CSS style to our page. So let's go ahead and we will add the code for the body of the document first. Okay, so I have the code already written. That'll save us a bunch of time. So I'm just going to copy, and let's go ahead and open up our CSS panel here, and we will paste our first rule. So we're going to target the body of the document. We'll add a background color and a font size. So this is going to establish our font size because I'm going to work with rem as far as the unit of measure for our type as much as possible. So we're going to try to make our page as flexible as possible. So we will work with rems. We might potentially work with ems for units of measure. We might use percentages. So if there's nothing wrong with using absolute units of measure like pixels, and we will, but it's probably best to become comfortable with using the relative units of measure. So again, the font size is 16, and we're doing that. So from this point on, one rem will be 16. Okay, and then we're going to zero out our margin, zero out our height. Actually, not height. This should be padding. Okay, so our margin is 0, our padding is 0. All of our content should go directly to the edges now. Okay, so if we save and we preview, everything should go right to the edge, and you'll see the green background that I've added. Okay, so let's go back to our step. The next thing that I want to do is let's go ahead and add our universal selector. And what we're going to do is let's go ahead and use our universal selector, which is the asterisk, and we're going to set our box sizing to border box. So this is the the CSS3 way of dealing with your box model. So we don't have to calculate all of the margin, border, and padding and width and figure all that out. So this is a whole lot easier. So when you tell an element to be a certain width, it's going to be that width. It will automatically calculate any of the margin, border, or padding you're using as far as the width. Doesn't always give us the result we want on height, but it will help us out with the width. Okay, so now what we need to do is deal with our nav element. Okay, so I have a choice here. I can target nav right here. Okay, so we can just target the nav. Or what we could do is we could use a class and target the class inside of the nav. So let's just do that. It'll be good to get used to it. So class equals, and we're going to give this a class of a name, user defined, main nav. Now you want to be careful. You would not call this top nav or side nav, or not, excuse me, or left or right. You don't want to be that specific. You want to let someone understand, or you let the machines or let others know if it's main, secondary, tertiary level, maybe what level or priority of nav, but don't call out a particular position or place with your class names, or even later on with your IDs. Okay, so main nav. So let's go ahead and copy in our main nav. Okay, And I think this one had a little extra space. We can just get rid of this and we should be okay. All right, so we're going to set the position to fixed, and we're going to set the top and the left to 0px. We could just do 0 on here. This would be exactly the same, because this would represent either a relative or an absolute unit. Okay, so the width is going to be 100%. And by the way, so fixed, this will now stay fixed. The rest of the page will scroll, but our nav will not move. It'll always stay at the top of the page. And it's going to begin drawing in the top left corner. The width is 100%. I'm going to set a minimum width. So this cannot get narrower than 950 pixels. That way, all of the content won't kind of go over the top of itself when the window is made or the browser is made more narrow. The browser will get narrow, but the content will stop reducing its size. Okay, so it can have a max width of 100% of the browser, but it will never allow the nav to get narrower than a combined 950 pixels. We're going to set the height to 100 pixels. The background color is going to be kind of a black here, dark gray black. And then I'm setting, just to be on the safe side, I'm setting what is called the z-index. Okay, so you have the x, and the x is your horizontal this way, and your y is up and down. Okay, the z-index will come towards you and then go away from you. So it's depth on the page, and a positive number will come towards you. So I'm doing this just to make sure that whatever content we have will scroll behind the main nav. Okay. All right. So we now have what should be. Let's go ahead and save, and we should have our navigation beginning to show up. Don't worry about what all this other stuff is doing. Okay, we still need to make it all move around. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to control our image. Okay, so I could just target nav image as a compound selector or main nav image. In this case, I'm going to give my image a class name. Okay, so class equals, and then the quote marks, and I'm going to call this class icon, like so. Okay, and just to be on the safe side, I'm going to open this up just to make sure that I didn't have an actual line break here. All right, so I'll move this back over. And what we're going to do now is we're going to target our image with another rule. All right. And what we're going to do is we are going to target image and then our class icon. And because this class is inside this image, we're going to target image.icon. So it's like one continuous selector. Okay, and there's reasons for doing this. All right, but for right now, just know that you can create a compound. We could do nav space image, or we could do dot main nav space image. We could just call out icon, but I'm going to include image dot icon. The position is absolute. Okay, so what happens is because this image, this does not it only knows its parent as the body of the document, okay, the HTML page itself. There's a difference between the HTML page, the body of the document is inside the HTML page. But my point is the image, we're setting the position to absolute. So it is going to believe, the image, that the upper left corner is its start point on the page, okay? So we can absolutely position our elements based on the upper left-hand corner of something. And that something is the parent. In this case, the image is going to believe that the body of the document is its parent. And the body of the document begins in the upper left-hand corner. Okay, so we're going to move our icon over 10 pixels and down 10 pixels. Okay, so that's the top and the left. The top, we're going to come down 10 pixels. On the left, we're going to come over 30 pixels. We're going to set a width of 91 pixels and a height of 111 pixels. I know in the instructions I said 100 by 100. Okay, so I fudged on this a little bit. You can do the same, but you're targeting for roughly around 100 by 100 pixels for the width and the height. My margin, I'm going to zero out my margin, zero out my padding. So when we save and we go to our preview, you should see that your image just moved over. You see this? I don't know if you can see this back here, but this is our H2. And what's happening is this element, our little avocado, is absolutely positioned. It's out of what's called the flow, the normal flow of the document. So this H2 doesn't know it's there. Now, it's here, we see it, but the other elements on the page that are currently what is called relatively positioned have no idea they're there. The same is actually true with our navigation, which is fixed. Fixed is out of the normal flow of the document. So the other content doesn't know it's there. And you see this type here? That's why this type is doing its weird stuff. Okay, why it's up here, why it's getting pushed over here. It's because it just doesn't understand really what's going on with the nav being fixed and the little icon here being absolute. Okay, all right, let's take care of our headline. This video is going to run a little bit longer, but we're going to deal with our headline next. Okay, so let's get the headline going here. So I got to copy the code. Let's go back and after our image. Okay, so I'm going to now look for, where's my text in here? Here's my H2. Okay, so I could target the H2 itself. Okay, and that would be fine, but we're not really going to get the result we want targeting the H2. So in this case, it's going to be easier if we do this. So I'm going to find my H2 and I'm going to add a div element like so. And then after our H2, I'll go ahead and close or end this div element. So what we're doing is we're going to take our H2, all right? So for the 125 class, we're using this one. For the 344 class, obviously, you would be using yours. And you wouldn't even have the mat one. Okay, I'm just doing this so it's the video is targeted to both classes. Okay, you only need the one that is relative to your class. Whenever I do something like this, you only need what is relative to your class. All right, so we're going to have this div. And again, I'm going to use a class. So let's do class equals. And we're going to call this class class. And I'm calling this class because this is our class. Okay, and it's the headline for our class. So not the selector class, but the 125 or the 344 class. So this is our class headline. Okay, and now let's go ahead and add our rule. I'll just go ahead and move that over. So we're going to use the class we created, class headline. And again, I'm using absolute position. That way I can use the top and the left coordinates to move that type anywhere I want inside of that fixed nav element. Okay, I'm going to set the width to 300. I'm going to set the height to auto so it'll automatically adjust. We're going to zero out the margin and the padding. The font family is just going to be a basic Verdana with a sans serif backup. The font size is 24px, okay? And the font weight is 400. Now remember, on the body of the document, I set the font size to 16, all right? So if on our headline we're going to go with 24, that's an additional, we're going to go with 24, so that is an additional 8 pixels, which is half of 16. So if we do this, font size, and we go 1.5 rem. Okay, so this should be 1.5 times the 16, which should be our 24 pixels. So I'm going to comment this out. Now we could use our enhanced progression, if you will. This font size comes after this font size, so this one would win. So if you were in a browser that didn't understand rem, then you would get this, because it wouldn't know what to do with this, all right? But we know that it's going to work, so let's go ahead and just comment out this font size, like so. Okay, and then we will save, and let's go ahead and update, and you will see that our headline now shows up where we want it, because it's absolutely positioned, and it's absolutely positioned off this upper left hand corner, just like our icon is. Okay, so I'm using top and left, but you could use top and right. You could use right and bottom, as well as you could use bottom and left to move your absolutely positioned content anywhere you want in here. And you should explore that. You can experiment. Okay, so let's go back. Now we need to add the previous, we need to deal with those previous buttons in our unordered list. Okay, so we have this unordered list with our two list items, previous and next. And again, what's going to make it easier for us is if we place our unordered list in a div. Okay, and when I'm first creating the structure, I don't always know that I'm going to need a div. It sort of depends on how the layout begins to happen. But as I started working on this, I realized that it's just going to be easier to add a division of space as this chunk of space that we can easily move around, and our unordered list will just follow. Now later on we could do this a different way, but it's a bit more complex. Using a div and absolute position is not always the right thing to do, but when you're first learning, it's the easiest thing to do. And as you become more comfortable, you can progress into a bit more sophisticated, a bit more elegant ways of moving your elements around. So let's go ahead and add our closing div here. And let's go ahead and fix, let's move this so you can see it a little better. And we will fix our indents like so. Make sure I have these correct. All right, that looks good. All right, so now this particular div, we're going to give this a class name of buttons, because we're going to use previous and next as buttons. So let's just go ahead and call our class buttons, because that has meaning. All right. So now let's go ahead and get our rule here. And I'm going to scroll down so we can see this a little better. And then I'll go ahead and fix this little formatting thing. All right, so I'm going to target main nav. So I could just do buttons, but I'm going to play it safe, and we're going to use a compound selector. So we're going to use main nav buttons to style the area around our unordered list. So again, we're going to set the position to absolute. In this case, the top will be 20 pixels from the top. As you can see, now I'm using right. And we're going to come over from the right-hand side 20 pixels. We'll set the width to 250. That should be wide enough. And we're going to set the height to auto and the margin and the padding to 0. So let's go ahead and save. And let's take a preview here. Okay. Now, our previous and our next button, they are here. There they are. They're black, so they're hard to see on the background. So in the next video, we're going to talk about how we can style these buttons, because we're going to end up making links out of them. Okay? So we're going to do that next.